Well, hi there. Welcome to the Pattern Pricing Calculator video where I'll show you how to use this calculator in your own handmade, creative, or craft business. So I'm Nancy Smith, aka the Yarny Bookkeeper, and you've gotten access to the Pattern Pricing Worksheet via a freebie on my website or through a Handmade Business Bookkeeping Academy membership. For those of you who don't know me, I'd like to take a quick minute to introduce myself. I'm a maker, mostly amigurumi, and I knit as well as crochet. I'm a career bookkeeper. I've been doing bookkeeping and working with numbers for well over 30 years at this point. But here's the thing. I'm not your bookkeeper, meaning I can't offer you personal advice about bookkeeping for your business because I don't know the specifics of what you do. But I can offer you general advice that could have a positive impact on your business. Now, I'm also not a CPA, and while I do have an associate's degree in accounting, taxes was just never anything I wanted to do. So my mission is to empower handmade, creative, and craft business owners to understand their bookkeeping and finances so they know they're making the money they deserve. So enough about me. Let's talk about pricing patterns. Now, I'm not a pattern designer, I'm a maker, but I know enough about pattern designers to know that they face some of the same challenges as product makers when it comes to pricing. How many times have you thought, what did it cost me to design this, And what should I sell this pattern for? What makes it tougher is that as a designer, you end up tracking a lot of different things and the calculations are very different. So these are some of the things that I'm sure that you want to know about what it costs you to design a pattern. Think about all that time that you spend creating the sample, writing the pattern, and all the writing that goes along with a pattern launch. You have more costs than just yarn. You've got tech editing, photography, shipping, etc. You need to know the amount of sales that you need to cover the cost of the pattern before you ever see a profit, and you need to know how many patterns you need to sell in order to cover those costs. And that's why I created the pattern pricing worksheet to help you out. Okay, so enough talk. Let's see this in action. But first, let me show you around a little bit. So the first thing that you're going to notice, you're going to have 4 tabs at the bottom of the calculator, all right? Because you're going to have the sample that I'm going to fill out in this video. So the first tab contains your instructions, all right, in case you need to look back at something. The second is a master worksheet that's 2 pages and it's in portrait style. Okay, so here's the first page and then you get to the second. The third tab is that same calculator, but it's done landscape, which might make it a little easier for you to work with. Now, I'm going to be working with this landscape version. Just because I can pretty much fit everything on the screen here during this video. You choose whichever layout you feel more comfortable with. So, like I said, I'm going to be working in the landscape version during this video, but you just follow along in whatever version that you want to use. And once you've finished, then you're going to make a copy of that worksheet for each pattern that you design. That way, you have a permanent record of what it cost you to design the pattern and how much in sales you have to have and the number of sales you need before you start seeing any profit for the pattern. All right. And in your copy, you're going to have that sample tab that is what I filled out here in the video. Let's really take a look at this. All these pretty green cells, okay, they all have formulas in them. So be super careful that you don't wreck those formulas. The pink cells are where you're going to enter information, and then you're going to be entering more information in section 1, time spent, section 2, the actual costs, okay, which is going to become your cost of goods sold entry for your bookkeeping. You're also going to be entering information in section 4, that general or annual business expenses. And section 5 is where all the mathematical magic happens because it's all formulas, okay? So yes, you're going to need to spend some time working in this master up front before you get down to working with a specific pattern. But it'll be well worth it in the long run. When we do the work up front, we then reap the benefits later, and that's working smarter. So the first thing you want to do is you want to enter the normal selling price for your patterns, okay? And you can change this, you know, for a specific pattern. Maybe it's more complicated, maybe it's less complicated. But for right now, we want to enter the normal price of our patterns. So I'm just going to say $5 and call it good, okay? Now, if you have a standard markup, enter that here. If you don't have a standard markup, then just use the amount that's here in the spreadsheet. Enter your hourly wage that you want to pay yourself. I'm just going to plop, let's make it interesting. I'm going to make it $15 an hour, okay? And you'll notice that as soon as I enter that $15 an hour here, it automatically carries over into the cost calculator side right here. So now you want to think about how many patterns do you do a year? Do you do 1 a month? You know, that would be 12. Do you do 2 a month? You know, that would be 24. Now, I'm just going to pull numbers out of my head. So I'm going to say I do 24 patterns a year. Now, you'll notice again, the number of patterns per year flops over here in the calculator, and as well as my normal pattern selling price, okay? So see how easy this is? The time spent in section 1, that's going to vary with each pattern. Now, I've put in a bunch of tasks here that are associated with a pattern design. I may not have all of them, okay? So if you need to add more things, then go ahead and start entering them here, okay? Just below that post-launch marketing, all right? And just those are the task names. Now let's look at the actual costs or the costs of goods sold. Again, I've put in some standard things, you know, tech editing, testers, shipping, photography, models, videos, a virtual assistant, yarn costs. And again, because I am not a designer, I may have left something out. So go ahead and feel free to add additional costs that you incur when you create a pattern. Now I want to scroll down here just for a second, and under future expenses, update your marketplace fees to be in line with what you pay, along with your credit card processing fees. And everybody wants to set aside 33% of their income to cover federal income tax, state income tax, as well as self-employment tax. Okay? Now, those things aren't taken into consideration in the cost calculator section, only because they're going to happen in the future, okay, after you actually release the pattern and start selling it. Now, general business expenses. This is where you're probably going to be spending the most time up front. Now, I've set up these expense categories for you so that you can match them to the expense section of your business tax return, just to make life easier. So go ahead and grab last year's business tax return and enter the numbers in the correct spots. Add categories if you need to. All right. Now, if this is your first year in business, don't worry. You can use this section to come up with a budget or a guesstimate of what these expenses will be for the upcoming year, and then change them here on the Master tab after you've filed your first tax return. And Section 5, that cost calculator with all these pretty green cells, those are all formulas that are taking numbers or amounts from all of the other, from sections 1, 2, 4, as well as these pink cells up here at the top. Okay, so let's say I know that tech editing is always $10 per pattern. I can enter those fixed amounts here. If I know shipping my pattern out or a finished sample out to somebody who's going to then take photos, so if I know shipping is always $15, I can add that in here as well, because these are standard things that always happen. Now, yarn costs, obviously, that's going to vary depending on the on the pattern. Anything that you're absolutely positive of, you can put in here, and you can see that it starts totaling up costs here, and it starts calculating costs over here. So once you've filled in all the standard stuff in your master calculator, if you're using Excel, you want to right-click on that tab, choose Move or Copy. You're going to make sure that you hit that Create a Copy option, and then you're going to indicate where you want it to be. So I'm going to say move it to the end, and I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to right-click again, and I'm going to choose Rename, and this is where you will see the sample. Okay, and I'm just going to put a name in here. So now I am ready, if you're using Google Sheets, you're going to right-click on that master and choose Duplicate, and then you're going to right-click on that new tab, choose Rename, and put in the pattern name. This gives you that permanent record, okay? So I'm just going to start pulling numbers out of my hat. I'm going to say, and when you enter your time, you want to make sure that you enter it in minutes, because the formula up here in time spent is going to take the minutes and divide it by 60 to come up with how many hours you actually spent. So I'm going to say it took me 270 minutes for the design, and you can see it automatically calculated that to 4.5 hours. I'm going to say another 270 for writing the pattern. And again, like I said, you know, I don't know. I'm just pulling numbers out of my hat. So finalizing the pattern was another 270. And let's say SEO research, another 270. So now I know it took me 18 hours to do everything I need to do to get that pattern out the door. Okay. So now if we look over here in the cost calculator, we have our 18 hours times the $15 per hour for our hourly wage. That gives us total labor costs of $270. Okay, so now I'm going to actually record the actual costs that for things that I paid for. So maybe let's say tech editing really wasn't 10, it was 30. And shipping was another 10, photography was 25, and yarn costs were $20. Okay, that means I have $85 worth of actual cost. These individual amounts are going to go into the cost of goods sold section in your bookkeeping records. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, I'm going to leave my marketplace fees just the way they were. Now I'm going to do those annual general business expenses. And I'm just going to, I'm just going to, again, pull numbers out of my hat, but you're going to use actual numbers from your tax return or your best guesstimate for what you're going to spend on these categories in the upcoming year. So let's say I had $2,000 in commissions and fees, $1,500 in contract labor, and then I come down here, I had $2,000 in software, $1,000 on my website, $2,000 in education, $2,000 for computer, and say I spent $1,000 on camera and microphone. Whoops, that's $1,000. And then I spent another $500 on lighting supplies. Okay, so that gives me, oops, somewhere I'm off. Hold on. 2,000. Let me go back and fix this. Data entry error. I said I spent $1,000 on the website, but I had only entered $100. So now I have $12,000 in annual expenses. Based on this, look at all this. So now I have my labor, okay, my total time of 18 hours multiplied by $15 an hour that I want to pay myself gives me $270 in labor. So now I'm going to add to that. I'm going to take my labor costs and I'm going to add those actual costs of $85 to give me a total of $355. And now I'm going to take that actual cost of $355 and I'm going to multiply it by my markup plus 1. So if my markup is 0.25 and I add a 1 to it, it becomes 1.25. So that gives me a pattern cost of $443.75. Now I'm going to take my annual business expenses multiply it by 0.25, and this is going to give me the dollar amount of my business expenses that will be covered by the sale of this pattern. Now I'm going to divide that by the number of patterns that I design each year, which is 24, to come up with a grand total of $125 in expenses that could be covered by this pattern. So now, here comes the fun part. So I take my $443.75, which is the cost of my pattern, plus the expenses of $125. That means I need to have total sales of $568.75 before I even start showing a profit. Okay, so now to figure out how many patterns I need to sell to cover all that, I'm going to take my total sales of $568.75 and divide it by the sales price of this pattern. So I end up knowing that I have to sell 114 patterns before I even start making a profit. Okay, and that information gets carried right over here. All right, so now I have this permanent record. Now, is this foolproof? God, no. Does it give you an idea? Does it give you something to strive for? Does it provide you with valuable information? You betcha. Okay, this is how you make informed decisions. So now in your bookkeeping system, you're going to keep track of how many of this particular pattern you sell, and you know that when you reach 114, everything from that point forward is pure profit, and you're working smarter because you're generating recurring revenue from something that you spent 18 hours on. Pretty cool, right? So there we are. If you found this video and this calculator to be helpful, think about joining the Handmade Business Bookkeeping Academy, where you have access to absolutely everything that I have done for bookkeeping training, as well as, calculators and worksheets just like this to help you in your handmade, creative, or craft business. And you can learn more by clicking this link. So thanks for joining. I hope you have a great day. Bye.